Jews, Christians and Muslims have a wonderful example of cooperation and collaboration in the past that should be a pointer for the present and for the future. And that's the period known as the Golden Age of Spain. For a period of about 300 years under Muslim rule, up till the 12th century, more or less, when the Iberian Peninsula was under Islamic control, there were periods of incredible cooperation and productive collaboration between Muslims and Christians and Jews.
Of course, at that time, Islamic civilization was intellectually much more active than Western civilization, and that was a time when the West was learning from the Islamic world. The Islamic world was not learning from the West, as it is the case today.
The Jews of Cordoba, beginning in the 8th century, and certainly by the time you get to the 9th and 10th centuries, Arabic is their maternal tongue, and it is also their educated language. They're fluent speakers of the Arabic literary tradition, and they are participants in the great learning that takes place in the libraries.
The Muslims know Aristotle and Plato and Pythagoras and all of these much more than the Christians did. And the Jews then learned these things, and Jewish philosophy began to flower in medieval Spain. There was no Jewish philosophy before, except for Philo, who lived in Alexandria, who wrote in Greek. One person. But the great Jewish philosophical tradition, which finally produced Ibn Gabirola, Maimonides, and Crescas, and all those great Jewish thinkers, they all flourished in Spain.
Maimonides himself thought in Arabic and wrote in Arabic, not just in Hebrew. And his great philosophic works were written in Arabic and then translated into Hebrew. His code of law was written primarily in Hebrew, so he thought in both languages. But the point is, it's the exposure to the sophisticated models. It's learning from those who went before you as to how you reconcile faith and reason, or religion and science, that enabled Maimonides to become the great philosopher.
First of all, the Jewish culture in Spain, in both architecture and poetry and music, was very, very close to the Islamic. If you go into the synagogue of, let's say, Cordoba or Toledo today, you see the Hebrew writings. If you take the Hebrew writings out and put Arabic in, it's almost identical with the Islamic architecture of that period.
And the great poetic invention of Al-Andalus is what is called the muwashahad, which is a genre of bilingual poetry, a poetry that's in dialogue. And it's a dialogue, and these are songs. These are not poems that are necessarily meant to be read. They're meant to be performed as songs.
For example, today, flamenco music in Spain, of course, has very deep roots in the Middle Ages and also in Arabic music, and to some extent in Persian music. Everybody has written about this. Or if you listen to 15th century, let's say, Jewish songs from Spain, when these people were expelled and migrated to Morocco, they kept their musical tradition. It's so similar to Arabic.
يكن حلم المكافي الكرى في الكرى.
In fact, it was through both the linguistic skills and capacities and artistic abilities of the peoples at that time that much of what today we talk of as European cultural legacy was nurtured and was developed. And this was within a context in which Muslims, Christians and Jews continued to worship in their own particular houses of worship, continued to observe their own particular religious ways of life, but were capable of coming together in commerce, in art, in academia, in terms of philosophy, to be able to provide a legacy for humanity at large.
Christians over the centuries were also consolidating power in the Iberian Peninsula. And you had Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand combining their forces, attacking the last remaining Muslim kingdom, the Granada. So the persecution of the Jews and the Muslims begins after the fall of Granada, where Christians are now sharply on the other side. So that the synthesis model has fallen. It has imploded, and you now just have the Jews and the Muslims on one side, and the Christians who are triumphant, who through force of arms have now captured Granada. Give them, the Jews and the Muslims, two choices. You either convert or you leave the land, because if you don't leave the land, you will be put to the sword. It is also interesting to note that the Jews, after centuries of living with Muslims, opted for, they were asked, where would you like to migrate to? And they opted for Muslim lands. So you have some very interesting developments taking place at the end of the 15th century, when so many world events are being shaped which will have an impact on our lives.